Good evening, barflies and lounge lizards, and welcome to what will probably be a very boring episode of Midnite Martinis, the show where I take a look at something from my personal collection. And tonight I'm going to be looking at some movies in which I have double and triple dipped on. And for those of you not up to date with the hip lingo of the DVD collector or movie collector, triple and double dipping is when you buy the same movie just in a different format or a different media, etc. I don't do it too terribly often, but just thought I'd show some examples here, some cases where I have. And the first thing we're going to look at is one of my favorite movies of all time, and that's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And I actually first saw this one at the theater, had no idea what it was about. Just one of those cases, and something we used to do back in the day was we would go to the theater, just look at the different posters and be like, oh, well, that looks interesting, gonna go see that. Saw I had Johnny Depp in it, decided to give it a chance. And I am very glad I bought the ticket and took the ride. I mean, this is just a fantastic example of oddball, I'd say independent cinema. And I actually had this VHS tape, I mean, since it was brand new, and it was my copy for a very long time. I actually didn't upgrade to DVD until probably about 3 or 4 years ago, which is quite surprising, but there was just something about watching this on VHS that felt right. But either way, I did buy this DVD, but the thing is I only watched it one time, because not long later I discovered the Criterion version. And beforehand I wasn't familiar with Criterion's work, but as soon as I started buying their stuff, I realized, well, anyone who's watching this probably collects movies and probably knows all about Criterion, so you know exactly why I bought it. But yeah, I just had to have it. And I believe this one has some extra commentaries and things like that, I believe. And of course it has a nice booklet and things like that. I mean, again, it's Criterion. This is some of the best of the best. Really great film. If you're ever in the mood for something really oddball and off the wall but highly entertaining and fun, it's this one. And if you want to get really technical about it, it's kind of a quadruple dip, because I have the book as well. And let me tell you a little story about this book, and this is a true story, I kid you not. But one summer, I was sitting by the pool reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And just suddenly I look up, for whatever reason, and across the way I see a child riding his bicycle. And this child was wearing a top hat. Just in the middle of summer, riding a bike, wearing a top hat. And I don't know, at that moment, it just clicked. I just said, hey, I need to read the book of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And that's how it came about. And the next one is one of my double dips, and that is The Crow. And let me tell you about The Crow. I was so excited when this first came out, because I was already a big Brandon Lee fan, thanks to Rapid Fire. So when I heard that Brandon Lee was doing a comic book movie, which essentially comic books were my world at that point, I was all in. And opening night, 7 o'clock showing, which was the first showing, this theater didn't have matinees, I was there standing in line. Granted, I was the only person standing in that line, but I was there. I had to make sure I was first one in. And oh doggy, I was blown away. Now this one has, I wouldn't necessarily call it a bad reputation, but I think there's a lot of misconception about this film. So I think people have this misunderstanding it's kind of more style than anything else, but that is not the case. I mean, at its heart, this is a great action movie and a great comic book adaptation. And one of the few cases where I like the film better than the source material, even though I do enjoy the source material, the film just kind of took it to another level for me. And continuing in that theme of comic book movies, we have another of what I consider to be one of the best comic book films of all time, and yet another one with an unfair reputation. Whereas this one I think actually has a bad reputation, because people have this weird bias against Zack Snyder, but I think Zack Snyder does some great work, especially on Watchmen. I mean, I understand he really changed the ending, and the giant squiddy thing in the city would have been very cool, but even still, this is still a great movie and highly recommended, especially if you like gritty, dark, different takes on superheroes. Really, Zack really put a lot into this one. And this one might end up being a triple dip as well, because I read about another edition that's even longer, has more extra footage than the director's cut. So I guess maybe it's like a super director's cut or something. So yeah, I may break down and get that one as well. But I don't know, it is a pretty long movie as is, especially the director's cut. Yeah, 24 minutes longer. But worth it. Now jumping ahead, we have a little movie that I've actually already covered on the channel, so I won't say too much about it. And that's Lady Snowblood, which is easily my favorite Chanbara film. Now this one I had on a disc for many years, and then through clandestine and secret means, I ended up with this one, which this is not a bootleg. It's official. It's an Animigo disc, but kind of looks bootleggy, doesn't it? Sorry about that glare. Either way, and this is a pretty good copy. I mean, I very much enjoyed it, but then after I got that Criterion fever, that sweet, sweet Criterion fever, and I saw that they'd released it, I just had to get the Criterion version. And from what I understand, not only is the picture supposed to look a lot better, the subtitles are supposed to be better. Now, I don't remember the subtitles in this one having any issue, but again, if they promise better subtitles, then I'm going to listen to Mr. Criterion, because he knows what he's talking about. And this is one of those films I think I've mentioned before, like with Female Prisoner Scorpion, is it transcends the genre. Even if you aren't the Chanbara films or samurai films or revenge type films, this is one of those ones I would recommend to anyone and everyone, especially your grandmothers. And if you're a fan of Kill Bill, I think this is a must see, because there would be no Kill Bill without Lady Snowblood. Now let's move into some classic anime. And speaking of classic anime, this is one of the classiest of the classics, and one of my very first exposures to what I really knew was this thing called anime. There had been anime around all my life. I mean, you go back and look at the early programming on, say, Nickelodeon and channels like that, a lot of it was anime. We just didn't know. But when I actually realized that Japanese animation, as we used to call it then, was a thing, this was one of the first movies I saw, and I rented this at Movie Gallery in the early 90s. I remember it was spring break, and I went into Movie Gallery to get some movies for spring break, and they had a new section. It was the Japanese animation section. Granted, I think it was only like 7 tapes tops, but this was one of them, and I saw this cover, and I absolutely had to rent it. And anyone who remembers classic anime from that time period probably looks fondly upon that Streamline Pictures logo, because back then, anime wasn't like it is now, where it's everywhere you look, where it's even on, you turn on basic cable and you can see anime. Back then, it was kind of a rare thing, and only the best of the best really made it over, kind of in this format. I mean, there was, of course, like I mentioned, Nickelodeon with the children's TV, stuff like The Little Prince and the Grimm's Fairy Tales, things of that nature. But as far as things like this, really kind of only the best of the best made it over, and Robot Carnival is absolutely one of the best of the best. So in my Robot Carnival journey, I, of course, first started, like I said, I rented it. Then, a couple years later, saw it on Sci-Fi Channel when they were doing their Anime Week thing they used to do, even though at that time, I think it was the very first one, so it was just Anime Night. It was Robot Carnival, Twilight of the Cockroaches, if I remember correctly, and Vampire Hunter D. So that just cemented my love for it, and even though I taped it that night, when I found a way to buy it, pretty sure this came from that company called The Right Stuff, I had to buy it. Weirdly though, even though this is supposed to be the dubbed version, and there's no subtitles on this tape, not all of it is dubbed. In A Tale of Two Robots, where the bad guy is speaking English and the good guys are speaking Japanese, that's exactly what they're doing, but there's weirdly no subtitles on the Japanese characters. But my favorite segments are Deprived and Starlight Angel, and neither of those need subtitles anyway, so I was still able to get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And speaking of Deprived and Starlight Angel, you want to talk about some of the best music of all time in anything? That is the theme to Starlight Angel. I actually own that CD too. And that was probably the first score, like movie score, I ever bought. So jumping ahead to the DVD, even though this was great, still it was a no-brainer to have to get the DVD as well. And it has the proper versions with the subtitles and that stuff. Saw recently that this has come out on Blu-ray as well, and let me tell you, I am super tempted to triple dip, just collection-wise. Because I'm one of those people that in most cases, I still don't actually see the difference. I know I'm going to get a lot of hassle for saying this, but I often can't tell the difference between the DVD version and the Blu-ray version. That could very well be because of my TV, but I just want it for the collection's sake. Yeah, this is really a must-see for sci-fi fans. If you're in the classic sci-fi, and even if you're not into anime, this is one of those great ones another one that transcends, that you can get a lot of enjoyment out of, regardless. And speaking of transcendent sci-fi anime, we have Project A-ko, which is one I may actually even like better than a Robot Carnival. And this is a sci-fi comedy and a parody of a lot of what was going on in anime at the time. But you absolutely do not have to be familiar with anime or anime at the time to really follow this one and enjoy for the humor to land. But this is an odd, quirky little story about this young lady, A-ko, and she is the daughter of Superman and Wonder Woman, who have retired and moved to Japan, and they had a kid. And not only does she have to deal with her annoying classmate Biko, she has to deal with a little bitty alien invasion as well. Yeah, absolutely great stuff. And this is another one I first saw on the Sci-Fi Channel's Anime Week. So of course, when I saw a way to buy it, I bought it. That's interesting. Free bonus, original theatrical trailers. Not something you would often see on VHS tapes. But of course, when it came out on DVD, of course, had to get it. And this is another one I heard that is going to be coming out on Blu-ray. Might have to triple dip for the collection on that one as well. And moving about as far away from anime as we can get, and that is the Dollars Trilogy. Even though this says the Man with No Name Trilogy, I've always heard it referred to, and I've always referred to it as the Dollars Trilogy. And I think I know a little bit more than a piece of paper. Except that I don't. Now this is one I probably wouldn't have double dipped on. I am very happy with this DVD collection because not only does it have the Dollars Trilogy, it has Hang 'em High, which is another fantastic but very underrated Western. And this is one of those ones that I would recommend this to most anyone, even if you're not into Westerns or you just kind of want to dip your toes in. This is the place to start. Now, as I mentioned, probably wouldn't have double dipped, so why did I double dip? Well, again, more secret, clandestine reasons that I really am not at liberty to talk about, so stop asking. Yeah, I really kind of go back and forth as to which one is my favorite in the Dollars Trilogy. For years, I maintained that it was for a few dollars more, but I don't know. Last summer, when I rewatched all three in a row, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly was pretty darn close. I mean, I really like Eli Wallach's character of Tuco in that one. These really are just phenomenal films, and easily the most famous of all spaghetti westerns. And as I say, sometimes things are popular for a reason, and there is absolutely a reason these are considered the best, because they really are some of the best. And last, we have another movie I saw at the theater opening night, and that is Army of Darkness. And I'll go on record and make a controversial statement here. You know, a lot of folks always gravitate toward Part 2, and whereas that is a very good film, it's all about Army of Darkness for me. But that's probably just because I'm really into fantasy films, and this is a great, not sword and sorcery film, shotgun and sorcery film. Yeah, or chainsaw and sorcery. Let's stick with shotgun and sorcery film. And it is really just took the series to a whole other level. And on the Christmas when I got my very first DVD player, the very first DVD I got was Army of Darkness, the director's cut. And this is the one with the futuristic ending. It actually doesn't have the theatrical ending on it, if I remember correctly. It does say it has some deleted scenes, so I don't know. But either way, this was really my first exposure to the world of DVDs and all the different accoutrements that came with it. Wow, I was hooked. It took me a long while to kind of adapt to DVD because I just didn't know if they were going to stick around. I was really convinced that they were just going to go the way of the Laserdisc, so I really held out. But when I eventually caved in, I caved hard for some Army of Darkness. But of course, as I said, I kind of like the theatrical, or did I say I kind of like the theatrical ending better? Either way, I like the theatrical ending better. So when Scream Factory put out this mega set with all the different versions, of course I had to have it. And if I remember correctly, this was an Amazon exclusive, or was it somewhere exclusive? but I ended up getting it for Christmas. So both these versions of Army of Darkness I got for Christmas from me mom. But that's all for this week, and sorry this one was boring, but hey, they can't all be zingers, and you get what you pay for.